Hey, it's time for the top 25 again.
25.
Blur Way. The first two games in this top 25 have something in common. They're both hard as nails and I can barely play them. Blur Way edges out Overdrive for the title of masochistic fast-paced game that Lawnie can't play. It's a top-down shooter in the style of Tyrion from Korea, but much harder. As a result, I only recommend it to shooter purists, but it's an excellent offering if you're into that sort of thing.
24.
Baryon. The other commonality is they're both top-down shooters. Baryon is also coincidentally Korean. It's also tough as nails, and it's also in that same Raptor Tyrion model, but constantly on the hardest difficulty. Hardcore fun, I think they call it, but don't play it when heavily medicated like I did. Otherwise, you won't last more than a few minutes.
23.
Shooting Gallery. After blasting through two exceedingly difficult shooters, your come-down game is a very nice point-and-click shooting gallery game, aptly titled Shooting Gallery. Use your mouse cursor as the sight of your gun and shoot all kinds of things for a high score. Whether it's clay pigeons or carnival items, it's good fun, especially if you have hardware mouse acceleration.
22.
Tournament Tennis. It might not have aged as well as Roger Federer did, but Tournament Tennis is one of those landmark ground-laying games that holds a special place in people's hearts. From the animation to the playing style, so much of its early entry into the genre was done right, and inspired every tennis title to come. Plus, it's still good fun to play today.
21.
Wordtris. Tetris, but with words. It's not going to set the world on fire with excitement, but those with a suitably advanced lexicon, or fans of Countdown, will have their brain tickled by forming words out of blocks instead of lines. It has all the usual polish from Spectrum Holobyte, and is more of a companion game or prototype to what would eventually be part of their release of Tetris Gold.
20.
Hide and Sink. Battleship by Elite Systems is a fantastic board game conversion, but one of those rare gems that never got a DOS conversion. Hide and Sink predates it by 7 years, and will have to do instead. This DOS version of an Apple II classic has 3 game variations, and none of the animations of the Elite version, but it still plays a good game.
19.
Panic Soldier. Remember Warcraft 2? Triggersoft sure does. After ripping off Warcraft with War Diary, they changed things up with Panic Soldier, a real-time tactics game where you lead a team of mercenary mechs through a series of levels and upgrade your squadrons in the style of XCOM or Jagged Alliance. They would then proceed to rip off Age of Empires, so clearly they had taste.
18.
The Immortal. I described this as Will Harvey's zany isometric dungeon puzzler, and I stand by that. You play a wizard searching for your master in a dungeon full of traps and puzzles and evil monsters, who generally wish you ill. On first appearance, it looks like an isometric hack and slasher with its own rhythmic combat sequences that predates Diablo by 7 years. But trust me, this is a trial and error puzzler, and a good one at that.
17.
Premier Manager 3. This will always hold the crown for me as the DOS game I spent the most time playing. For a certain subsection of the British public in the 90s, these gremlin management games were part of a glorious time that featured Championship Manager, Ands Toss, and various others like Ultimate Soccer Manager, all vying for the crown left in the wake of Progenitor Football Manager for Best Football Management Sim. Premier Manager 3 is the culmination of that 90s icon-based style of management, with an isometric match engine, editor with the deluxe version, and glorious fax machine.
16.
Wolf. Remember The Sims? Now imagine instead of a group of people, you're controlling a single wolf with wants and needs and all the senses like hearing and smell and superior sight at your disposal to avoid pesky humans and hunt down game. Then add scenarios, a day-night cycle, and clear objectives that result in death should you fail. It's a unique wildlife simulator unlike anything I've seen before or since, and for that alone it deserves its spot in the pack of great games.
15.
Tapper. An excellent conversion of Sega's arcade classic. Serve a bunch of very demanding patrons across several bar tops, collecting tips and making sure that glasses don't get smashed as they're sent back your way. Better get that drink to them quickly, as the tide of uninebriated hordes are angrily progressing in your direction. Frantic fun with infinite replayability, so long as you don't match your customers drink for drink, otherwise you'll pass out on your keyboard.
14.
Paganitsu. Apogee does Sokoban with completely legally distinct protagonist Alabama Smith heading into tombs full of monsters and treasure and puzzles and trying to collect keys. It even has cutscenes and humour too, top-down puzzling fun that anyone can play, at least until they get horribly frustrated and throw their keyboard out the window.
13.
Dig Dug, a coin-op classic from Namco capably ported to every known system in the universe. You're digging through the ground, eating extra stuff for points and inflating your enemies until they burst or run from you in terror. Sure, a certain digger is better for the system, but this PC booter version is capable and moreish.
12.
Burger Time. Peter Pepper picks a pick of PC platformers to produce putrid pickles perfectly. A coin-op classic from... wait a minute. Yes, it's another arcade conversion, this time with beautiful composite graphics, as you climb up and down ladders to assemble burgers, and defy ingredient-based adversaries from catching up with you. You can't go wrong with this infinitely replayable and accurate chef simulator, as all the best kitchens have a multitude of ladder-based levels, right?
11.
Operation Carnage. Remember Smash TV? I never played it, but Midnight Synergy sure did. They also remember it never coming to DOS. So they remedied that by making their own Smash TV and calling it Operation Carnage. It's a multi-directional arena shooter with lots of aliens to shoot, and gore and explosions. There's different weapon types and power-ups, and it's all very frenetic in the best kind of way. A shame the sound's in mono, but it carries that Smash TV torch admirably for the DOS ecosystem. Good stuff.
10.
The King of Chicago. Cinemaware were known for their narrative-heavy mini-game-laden adventure titles. Like fellow Top 25 entry It Came from the Desert, and this one is no different. Play as Pinky, an up-and-coming gangster in the absence of Al Capone, and play a choice and consequences game of conversational intrigue, with talking heads and speech and thought bubbles aplenty. Manage your gangster empire, engage in minigames, and savour that sweet 1930s atmosphere. An excellent example of story-rich gaming that would influence generations to come. And yes, like all Cinemaware titles, it's better on the Amiga.
9.
Gauntlet. Yet another arcade conversion makes the list. Gauntlet is a top-down slay-em-up that pits your intrepid hero against hordes of monsters, preventing you from getting to the level exit. Slaughter your way through 100 levels, and pick up a bunch of potions and keys, as one of 4 characters with unique stats, or play in co-op mode. It's the title that launched 1,000 action RPG imitators, and it's incredibly addictive to this day.
8.
Fragile Allegiance. You're tasked by TetraCorp, a totally benevolent and definitely not evil organization, to create mining colonies on asteroids in a strategy game that's in real time, but definitely isn't a real-time strategy game. Sell the ore you mine for a tidy profit and then build yourself a nice defensive invasion fleet, or nuke other asteroids into oblivion. That or go all Picard on them and negotiate for peace. It's a unique strategy title from the tail end of the DOS era, and should be played by all space strategy game fans.
7.
Sokoban. I played this game while delirious from fever, and released it around the same time as my big Fallout review. It went viral, my Fallout video did not. Turns out that people really like Sokoban, the Japanese art of moving warehouse boxes into specific locations. Originally released in the East in 1982 and brought over stateside in 87 by Spectrum Holobyte to DOS. You move your little man on a screen with a time limit and shift boxes into the right place. It all gets very puzzling very quickly, as does the lift-based level selection. Variations of the game have been released on almost as many systems as Doom, and it's a game every puzzle enthusiast must eventually play.
6.
The Elder Scrolls Arena. What if we took Ultima Underworld but had an enormous overworld too? That was the lofty goal of one Bethesda Softworks, who had no idea what they were about to unleash upon the world when they crafted the first Elder Scrolls game. Arena wears its influences on its sleeve, without understanding them entirely. There's dangerous dungeon crawling in first person, conversation systems, and a series of bizarre fantasy creations that would be expanded upon enormously in later titles. It's no Ultima, but it's entertaining in its own right, and laid the groundwork for another enormous DOS-based RPG to come from them.
5.
Princess Maker 2, a cancelled English port of another Japanese game that ended up online anyway. This time a princess has fallen from the sky and you have to tutor her, making sure she eats right, studies well, builds good characteristics in a statistics-heavy management overview, and even goes on top-down adventures through the game world. It's a social simulation game, and how your princess fares is up to you, but it's a completely unique concept, and I was totally spellbound by it, and I really wasn't expecting to be.
4.
Lands of Lore, the Throne of Chaos.
Thank you, Patrick. Taking all the lessons learned from Eye of the Beholder and Legend of Kyrandia, the team at Westwood crafted their own RPG free of the Dungeons & Dragons license, combining the best of point-and-click adventure with smoothed-down dungeon-crawling elements. The result is the Throne of Chaos, a grid-based anomaly of a game that purists love to hate, and fans of a simpler style embrace wholeheartedly. This is to blobbers what Skyrim is to open-world RPG games, a real-time adventure polished to a fine sheen with glorious full-voiced Westwood production values and a Frank Lepaki score, a game everyone can enjoy and an adventure well worth taking.
3.
Star Wars Dark Forces. Introducing the most badass protagonist in Star Wars history, Kyle Katarn. Dark Forces is LucasArts at their peak, outperforming Doom in many aspects, and sporting a soundtrack by the team behind TIE Fighter. It's a first-person shooter that has you gunning down legions of foes as a merc-turned-rebel with a cause. Steal secret plans, invade bases, punch people. Dark Forces has you uncovering conspiracies, and thanks to a remaster, is finally held in the same esteem as Duke and Blood and all the other 90s shooter classics.
2.
Dungeon Keeper. It's good to be evil. Bullfrog's management sim takes on the macabre job of dungeon keeping. And in keeping with their other efforts, their first attempt is arguably the best ever made in the history of the genre. From a top-down or sort of isometric perspective, you build a dungeon and creatures join you through a portal, as you dig through the dirt with your trusty imps and build rooms to appease your denizens. Then you defeat the lord of the land, the heroes that reside in the level, or even your opposition keepers. This is no ordinary RTS though. Much like Populous and Theme Park, you're not actually in control of the units. Your creatures have autonomy and needs to be met, and go where they want. They can even abandon you entirely if you don't play ball. It's one of the best games made for any system, and should be number 1 on this list, but for
1.
Doom 2, Hell on Earth. I don't like Doom 2. What? I don't. The levels are uneven in quality, the original DOS engine gives me motion sickness, the new enemies frustrate and confound, and it only adds one new weapon. It's still probably the best DOS game ever made, if not the greatest game ever made, and it's still played by a legion of fans and custom map makers 30 years later. 30 years of constant development and improvement from the community. 30 years of actively competing with the best the gaming world has to offer and holding its own, if not being outright better in the minds of millions to this day. A near infinite amount of content and a near infinite amount of ways to play it. It took everything the original Doom did and said more, then gave you a super shotgun to help matters. It's one of the most played DOS games in history, it's probably the most played DOS game right now as I'm saying this, and was the first Doom sold in stores. So there's not really much I need to say about it, as it has been said many times. Doom will never die, only the players will.